Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree. On this podcast, we are discussing all of the topics that help us have breakthroughs on our personal and spiritual development journeys. My name is Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a channeler, energy healer, tarot reader, astrologer, and soul alignment coach. My mission in my work and in this podcast is to help teach people how to shift their consciousness, how to heal, and how to release beliefs and patterns and fears of their ego mind so that they can step into alignment with their soul to live lives of abundance, purpose, and bliss. In these episodes, I will be sharing either through my own lens and my own channel or through the experiences of my guest, wisdom and expertise about healing, spirituality, psychology, personal growth, holistic wellness, mysticism, consciousness, and so much more. My hope is that these conversations help you feel seen and provide support and inspiration for you with your own personal breakthroughs. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited for today's guest. Today, we have on the founder and CEO of the Modern Mystic Shop, author of Spells for the Modern Mystic, a ritual guidebook and spellcasting kit, and renowned tarot reader and teacher, Kelley Knight. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on today, and I'm so excited for the listeners to get to know you a little bit. And let's start with our fun little rapid fires about all of the spiritual personal development stuff that we love. So to start off with, if you could tell everybody your pronouns and where you're located in the world.
Okay, so she, her, and currently in New York City, but by the time you're listening to this, maybe Atlanta, Georgia.
How exciting. We love a move. We love a change up. Okay, now your big three in astrology.
Sun in Scorpio, moon in Cancer, and Sag rising.
Love. And do you know your human design profile?
A generator. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Is that one? Yeah,
that's the right one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You got it. You got it.
So many different kinds now. Yeah, I'm a generator.
So many different kinds. And then another one, fun one. Do you by chance know your numerology, like life path number?
9.
Oh, you're 9.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that on you for sure, especially with that Scorpio energy too, which
They're
makes
really
our topic today perfect. Navigating endings and transitions with the life path 9. Couldn't think of anything more perfect. And then the other stuff, if you've ever done a Myers-Briggs or an Enneagram.
Yeah. I don't feel like it resonates with me, but I have tested INFJ.
And then have you ever done Enneagram, like the number thing?
Oh, yes, but I forgot. I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good. That's
but
another one that changes too. And then my last question for this fun little round of rapid fires, if you are a Harry Potter fan, do you know which Hogwarts house you might be in?
Can you believe that I've never seen or read Harry Potter?
I am
Ever?
shocked.
And also Star Wars, like nothing. I've never seen any of that. I'm definitely out of touch with those things. But my life is fantasy sci-fi.
In real life, yeah. Like you live it in the real.
Yeah, so it's like, the fiction's less exciting.
Oh my God, that's so funny. And honestly, I feel like that's true because I super big fantasy person, but also with my Pisces moon, I feel like the fantasy and the stories and everything is just something that feels really like comforting and enjoyable to me. But I got super into fantasy when I was young. I didn't get into Harry Potter until I was older because my very Christian parents thought that it was evil, which LOL, that's really funny to think back at.
Totally.
And I didn't have the magic and spirituality in my life until later. So exactly like you said, I feel like I was craving it. I was getting like little doses of it through the books that I was reading and the movies that I was watching. But now it's in my real life. So I can totally understand how you're like, hey, I got it real time.
Yeah, I don't need it anymore. Don't add more stuff to this.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And now I would love for you to tell the listeners just a little bit about you, a little bit about your story coming into the work that you do now. And I can't wait to hear your take on it because like we just talked about at the beginning, I know that you're like a straight at it, no bullshit, like just keeping it real with it. And I know you also have kind of an interesting story too. So please tell us whatever you are moved to share.
My origin story, how I became Superwoman. I'm just kidding.
Exactly. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all of that. So, I mean, through this kind of work and like the magical world and realm, I really entered through the gates of self-help and psychology and like just self-improvement. So, in my mid-20s is when I started really seeking because I followed all the rules. I was a college athlete. I was went to a good university. I had a great job, owned a condo, all of those things, had a great relationship, and I was deeply unsatisfied. And I was like, what? Is this like a trick? I did all of the things that you're supposed to do to promise well-being and satisfaction. And I felt like I woke up in a life that wasn't my design. And so that put me on a quest of like, what else is out there? And so I found an organization that was really like Gestalt therapy, Buddhist studies. It was like psycho-spiritual work, group work courses. I learned a healing modality that was really effective for me, and I learned tarot there. And so I sort of like kind of merged those sort of worlds. And that's also still how I approach a lot of this stuff. It's like if the psychological and the psychology in your psyche isn't on board, it's really hard to get the magic to work, in my opinion. I think they really do work hand in hand in a lot of ways that I develop ritual has to do with also the psyche and the mind. So that was sort of like my intro. And then during that exploration, I was with that organization, I think like 5 years, maybe 7 years. I had like a very crazy psychic awakening where we were doing group work and we were basically in like this trance hypnosis sort of state for about 14 hours in one day. It's a lot. So during that time, I had like what I thought I saw was like someone opening my skull. Like, and I was hearing like sounds like a mechanic, like zip, zip, zip. And then the sounds of like someone rewiring my brain and then closing it up. And I was like, oh, I'm just like really tripping right now. I just thought I was like, that's a hallucination. I was like, I am hallucinating. This is crazy. Like I'm under this hypnosis. And I was like, that's kind of funny. And then like when I got home from that retreat, I was in the shower and I heard like my clairaudience turned on, like speak, speak, speak. And I was like, okay. And then I started speaking, which turned out to be I was trance channeling. And that's like when I met my first guide. And I was like, holy shit, like what the fuck is happening? So from there, like in the next like weeks that followed, I was seeing and sensing a lot of things like spirits and deities and angels. Angels mainly was the main thing, which I've come to the conclusion that that was my access point because I was raised Catholic and they were like not intimidating to me and it felt safe. It's like, oh, it's an angel. I've read about you in the Bible. Not scary, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's sort of like simultaneously, it was interesting and exciting and then terrifying. And I thought, am I having a psychotic break? Like, was doing this work that we were doing, did it break me somehow? And so I prayed and asked for a teacher. And I said out loud, like to whoever could hear me, if I'm not crazy, I need guidance like this. And, so long story short, well, it's not short, but I went into a coffee shop. I saw a flyer for an angel circle and I was like, I'm seeing angels. Let's go to this thing. So my boyfriend at the time, who turned out to be my husband, went with me. And I walk in and the facilitator just looked right at me. And she was like, you. I'm like, me? And she said, there's two angels standing behind you, Gabriel and Metatron. And those were the only two names that I was able to pull out from my experience. And she said, they want you to know that you're not crazy and to stay after class and like stay afterwards. And I need to talk to you.
Oh,
it was so validating. Like the fact that like the exact names, like that my exact worry in that time was sort of brought to the surface. And she became a mentor of mine and she worked with me for a long time for free, taught me about like trance channeling, how to open and close my psychic gifts, kind of giving context to what was going on. When I got all my psychic gifts turned on and I shared it with the group, and because I thought that was the point of all the work we were doing is to be able to be aligned and have our own intuition. I was mocked. I was told I was making myself special. I was told like the leader of this organization is the only one that has these gifts. Like, who do you think you are? And so for a period of time, they said if I was trance channeling, I couldn't be part of the group and I was living with someone that was a facilitator there. I couldn't live there. And so I cut it off. And I got so depressed because once you have that in your life, I almost feel like you cannot live without it and be a harmonious person. And that's when I decided to leave. So I snuck out like a thief in the night, never looked back. And that's sort of like my psychic origin story. And then from there, I decided because like my awakening was so big and unwieldy that I wanted to use tarot as the conduit to my gifts because it felt safe and it felt like an access point. And so I took the tarot that I learned, and it really spoke to me in a different way after I left that organization and after I was given the Wild Unknown tarot deck by Kim Krans. Like that also like really merged with my brand and style of intuition. And I
Mhm.
started doing readings for like fun for people on Instagram. And then I got very popular very quickly. And over time became a professional tarot reader. And then from there opened the store in a really magical way. And now it's been, I don't know. So like I've been reading professionally probably since I think 2011. A lot of people had awakenings in 2011. And then the store in Atlanta has been open since 2016. And so now I'm tarot reading and run Modern Mystic Shop. We have a line of over 100 products, published author, and more to come to share in a future episode with other opportunities.
Yay.
I mean, that's a kind of a long story. I'm trying to like condense it
No,
for
it's
you.
so good. No, I love it. I love for all of us to get to hear how people go from their starting point to where they're at now, especially for people that like we might look up to as, having reached some of the goals that some of us have, which I would absolutely put you in that category of, running a business, being an entrepreneur that's aligned from a soul place that you feel like is deeply of service, also having something that you're doing where you're using your spiritual gifts. Like a lot of people who listen to this identify with that. And I think
Mhm.
that it can just be so helpful to hear how that process happens because I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to like make it happen quickly, or if there are bumps along the way then that means that we're doing it wrong or there's something wrong with us or something like that. And I think the more stories we can hear about how people actually got there, like the truth of how that actually works, we can give ourselves a lot more grace and we can allow our path to be whatever it is, knowing that
Yeah.
basically everybody has had their moments, and that it's
Yeah,
not
for sure.
all rainbows and sunshine sometimes,
No, it's mostly, I mean, I hate to say it, but for a lot of it, it's mostly not rainbows and sunshine, to be honest. And for my experiences, I think the reason why I was able to have that such an abrupt psychic awakening was because I spent like 5 years prior doing deep trauma healing work. And I
Mm,
feel like the trauma was almost like in the way of me and my intuition. And I spent a lot of times almost like clearing the pipes. And
mhm,
then once it got uncorked, it was like, oh my gosh, I have access to everything. And
mhm,
that's the part that like I think people don't necessarily lean into maybe is like for me, and I mean, I've probably done 10,000 readings at this point. So I've talked to a lot of people. I think people like want to skip the healing part and go straight to like, I want to talk to my dead grandma. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And for some people, maybe that is how it works. But I think for a lot of people, I think like the trauma that we store in our body and our psyche and our energy field and our emotional body kind of like could like warp what's coming through, can
totally.
block you from yourself. And so I love that like everyone always talks about like overnight successes. And sometimes when people hear my story about like the psychic awakening, it's like, oh, you just flip the light on. It's like, yeah, but like I spent a lot of time like in the mud
Yeah.
before that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a podcast episode on like growing your spiritual gifts. And really, most of the episode that I talked about was doing self like help and healing work
Yeah,
because
totally.
like that is the foundation, and it kind of is simple, but it isn't simple. But even if you think about like what would block you listening and trusting what you hear, it's probably your skepticism, it's probably your fear, it's probably your
Mm-hmm.
self-judgment, your self-shaming, right? It's probably a sense that you don't feel like you're safe or you're supported to follow or listen to like things that come through. So it makes total sense that you would have to like work with yourself and face some of those fears and the pain and all of that kind of stuff and make sense of that. So exactly like you said, your channel is open and it's clear and you're not getting in your own way for the gifts that are already there and that want to be available to you based on experiences that left an imprint that's just not helping you.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, I share a lot of similarities with your story. I also came in through like the self-help and like psycho spiritual thing, which is still something that really interests me. Like that's still very much of my orientation. One of my biggest things I'm always teaching about is like nervous system regulation and like really like acknowledging your fears and processing beliefs and like working with your subconscious to shift things, because that's when you can allow other experiences to happen. So I agree that there's a lot of power in, to me, it's really like embodying your spirituality, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
like
100%.
really anchoring in. Because we're one of the things that I always say is that like if our soul wanted to be like 100% rainbows and butterflies and like spiritual or whatever, it wouldn't have been incarnated. Like, why would that have
Mm,
happened? You
yeah.
know, like the
Yeah.
whole point we're here is to live the humanness, and humanness is messy. So we shouldn't be trying to escape it all the time with our
Agreed.
spirituality. You know?
Agreed. But I will say this, I mean, my experience has been this, and I've seen it with others. Like once when I first started to like get aligned with like the channeling and all that stuff, like it felt so good that I wanted to hang out there. And I feel
Mhm.
like I hung out there for like a really long time, like years. Like so because I also um so while you have the okay, you do the trauma healing work, then you can get I got in touch with my intuition, but there was still like trauma and healing to be had, and I was feeling things a lot more deeply because
Mhm.
I was clear, right? So then you get those deeper layers. And sometimes it was better just like to hang out like up here and hang out with like my angel friends and like my guides or whatever. But then I realized like that's not to your point, like that's not what it's about. It's like, how can I integrate? I didn't feel integrated at that time. It was
Mhm.
like really psychic and really intuitive, but like not so much in the earth plane. And then when you integrate it, I feel like that's when I started getting my success, like
Yeah.
here. Cause like this is where the work is done. And that's when I started getting momentum here is
Yeah.
like that integration piece.
100%. And the listeners who have listened to some of these recent podcast episodes I've done, we've talked a lot about how we can get really stuck in upper chakra stuff, and like we have to
Mhm.
come down and ground it. And when we ground it is when we literally materialize it, you know, like
100%.
when we get closer to the earth, that's when things show up in our reality. And my thing is like, there's no shame in the game. Like, there's purpose in every season. So, you know, even for myself, times where I might have spent like really being up in, you know, la la land with my guides or something myself, I'm sure that there was purpose and me growing and getting familiar with that energy. But yes, I always want to anchor back into what feels like the point, which is integrating, grounding holistically, sort of embodying all of the parts of that, because that's when I tend to feel the most centered, you know, the most balanced. And when I feel like I can navigate the natural ebbs and flows of life with a little bit more grace, you know?
Yeah, I do. I agree with that.
I love it. And I think that tees us up perfectly for our topic today, which is navigating some of those ebbs and flows in lives, transitions, endings, all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about that more. We are back, everyone. And I think that this episode, when we're recording it, is right at the end of Pisces season. This is the last day of Pisces season today. We're starting the Aries season, which is the end of the astrological new year. And well, the end of the astrological year coming into the new year, which feels very serendipitous. We're literally finishing up a whole cycle and starting a new one. And that is what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about that time, that feeling, that experience of when we can sense that we're finishing a cycle and endings happening, some sort of transition is happening. And that can feel really tricky to do as humans because we like to get a little attached to things. We can feel fear really big, and fear can make it feel really hard to let ourselves flow into new and unknown things. And we want to channel through some stuff, share some insights that might make those times feel maybe a little bit easier, at least give us the tools to be able to navigate them in a way that feels like it is supporting us as much as it can. My first question to you, Kelley, is why do you feel either so passionate or like this topic is so important to understand?
Because I'm in it. And like this is because I'm in it right now. And I like having these conversations, sort of like I've had multiple conversations. So it's sort of like before, during, and we're kind of like in the during slash after piece of it. So uh, um I think it's important to be able to navigate these transitions with grace the best that we can and to learn from them because there's no escaping endings and transitions. And this is the first transition that I've gone through, and I'm 41 years old, where I really haven't been kicking and screaming.
Mm.
And I feel like I've learned a lot through this process that might be of value and that I hope to apply and then also refine moving forward because I know it's going to be happening again and again. So it's just like the most common one of the most common experiences that we have as people. And then as a
Mhm.
Scorpio person. I'm thinking like, and the number and a 9. I'm just thinking about how many times I've reinvented myself and like what that has looked like in the past versus this time. Like previously, I would have to get to a rock bottom place to change. And this time I've been more proactive, sort of seeing the signs and like navigating it differently. So hopefully it
Mm-hmm.
could be of use because it's something everyone's going to face or have faced numerous times.
100%. And what I'm feeling called to say is that I'm feeling called to point out that when we want to grow or when we are in, let's just call like a manifesting practice where we're actively trying to call in either new versions of ourselves or new goals into our life, that requires endings, right? Like
Yes, for
creation
sure.
requires death, like creation requires destruction. So I know that it can be really exciting, which is the point, like the inspiration and the joy of the new things we want to bring into our life, but that is always going to be partnered with some sort of closure, some sort of transition. So if really, I feel like what this is always going to be tied to is anybody who's trying to do that work of growing and all of that kind of stuff, you have to master both parts of it. And the other thing that you said too, that you felt like you always had to have like a rock bottom to really get to that next level. I had actually, it was the psychic that you recommended it to me. I think her name is Leah. Is
Lee
that her name?
Morgan.
Yes, Leah Morgan. I had a session with her and she said something that has stuck with me to this day. She said, the reason why that situation felt so hard and got so messy and felt so painful was because that was the equivalent to how much you were holding on to it. Like it had to get
Oh,
so messy in order for you to let go, or else you would have never let go of it. And you needed
yeah.
to in order for the next thing to come to you. If you hadn't have been so attached, it probably wouldn't have needed to get so messy. You would have seen the signs, you would have felt them, and you would have said, ah, okay, it's time to let it go. And it could have just passed. But
Yeah.
because you didn't see that, you were holding on for dear life, it's like it had to shake you off, you
Yeah.
know, and that
Kind of like
can
the
feel
tower card.
uncomfortable.
It's kind of
Yes.
like when those tower moments happen in tarot. It's like it's because they've been knocking at the door, like, hey, 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 and then finally it's like, fuck it. Like, gotta go.
It's gonna
We
get
gave you
torn down.
yeah, we gave you a lot of chances. I'm so sorry. This is gonna feel so out of your control now, but
Yeah.
it's
We're trying
you
to
gotta
help
move.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
you gotta
asking us
move.
for help, universe. You're asking us, the universe guides, for help to get you where you want to go. We've tried to let it be on your terms, but like we know you really want it. So now we gotta pull it away. We gotta tear it down.
Yeah, and
Literally
sometimes
sometimes.
sometimes you're on a time clock. Like,
Yeah.
I know enough astrology to be dangerous, but there's certain like there's certain timing to things, right? Where you can be in these auspicious windows and it's like, come on, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. And then they push you out of the airplane.
Yeah.
Because it's like you have to drop now.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, what really helped me during this process, so many things, but just to mention is I did a workshop here in New York with Kim Kranz. She's the creator of The Wild Unknown. She's a friend of mine. And we like I forgot what the actual theme was of the workshop, but you like wound up like drawing a word, or she gave you a list of words that were like dualities to hold. And mine was I picked sunrise and sunset. And when I started looking at this period of time as a sunset, as opposed to like an abrupt ending or a rock bottom or having to let go, that shifted. And I was like meditating a lot about like sunsetting. And sunsets are beautiful and there's like ease and they're natural. And we're not afraid that if the sun sets, it's never going to rise again. We know that it will. And
Mm,
so even just like those sorts of shifts were just so comforting to me, like in this transition. And not to be vague, the transition that I've been going through was, related to my business, closing the store in New York here that I had put so much time and energy into, transitioning other areas of my business, having to like reduce staff, which was really hard for me, having to like deciding to relocate back to Atlanta and reinvest in that community. Like all of these things have been kind of unfolding over the past probably 6 or 8 months. And like seeing it as a sunset also didn't make me feel like it had to be done with an urgency either. Like
mm.
sunsets, they happen every day, so it's not like the slowest sort of thing, but it's just like a gentle, gradual extinguishing, you know?
Yeah.
And that also allowed me to just like be cool with the timing and like not feel like, oh shit, I gotta go now, you
Yeah.
know?
I'm
Mhm.
curious, how do you think a past version of Kelley would have navigated some of these changes that made themselves known to you that they had to happen in contrast to how you've navigated it this go around?
Yeah. I think more like bargaining with the universe, more like gripping, more bargaining, more like um half measures. That's what I learned about myself. Like, for example, it's hard to talk about having to like lay people off in your company or reduce staff, right? And I was, in the past, I would do like, maybe we can go down to part-time, maybe we can do this or that, or like trying to do every possible thing, but the actual full measure that needs to be done, right?
Mm,
And this time, like when I thought about like the end game, the biggest vision of what I want to achieve and what needs to happen based on, facts and also intuition, it's like actually taking the full step and taking responsibility for the full step instead of these like tiny steps or half measures or just having to revisit it again in another 30 days or 60 days. And I
mm,
have to say, like some of the things that I decided were really hard. And after I made the decision, they weren't hard to do. It was hard to make the decision to do them. And then
mm.
once I did them, it felt like such a relief. And to me, that relief is like, oh yeah, this is right. Like that breath, like this is actually right. And then I would also say like over responsibility, like in the past, taking over responsibility for every single person in every single scenario. And I had to work with like my counselor to get to the point where I'm like, unfortunately, like I hate that we had to let a few people go within my business that were just incredible women and great team members. But he was reminding me like that they're incredible women and great team members. And then that like to trust that like they have their own journey and like something better for them and like that they're capable and all these things instead of me like being controlling and having to like just almost the arrogance to think that like I know what's best for them or like I don't know
Yeah,
if I'm being making sense with that,
that makes total sense.
but
Yes.
it's like a lot more surrender and a lot more like trust in the process, in the people, in the higher powers that be
Mhm.
to guide this. And it's been pretty graceful. And then with the like sun setting, I also learned like in the past and not even in the recent past, I had this belief that what the future was going to be worse than the past or present. Like I wasn't feeling like I was stepping into something better. I don't know why. Like, and maybe it
Mhm.
was because the life that I'm in right now is the biggest version of my life. And maybe I had a ceiling as to like what I could imagine my life to be. So I'm like, if this is the pinnacle, anything other than this must be worse.
Mm,
And I was walking down the street one day and I was like, I caught that belief somehow. It like clicked. I'm like, oh, I'm afraid because I don't trust that whatever's next is actually going to be good. And I think that's always how I've navigated transition. And so like I want to hang on to the like okay thing or the good enough thing or whatever. And then I realized like, oh shit, like this is actually going to be better somehow than I can even imagine. And I like kind of broke part of like my own glass ceiling. And
yeah.
wouldn't you know that like that awareness gave me the peace because I was like, that's also true for other people. If I look at the history of my life, it's never actually gotten worse. Or if it has, it's been temporary. It's like a slingshot. You move back, but push yourself forward. So I have that belief for myself and everyone that everything's working out. And then as soon as I made that shift, very shortly after, everything started falling in line with ease and like new opportunities, new places to live, new future ventures and projects that were like 10 times more exciting to me than whatever it is I was doing right then.
Hmm. Yes. That is so real. I'm so grateful that you shared that. One of the things that I'm working with my clients on all the time is identifying how they're believing the future is either safe or not safe for them, right? Because a lot of
Mm,
times when we're feeling that restriction, when we're feeling that resistance, it's because there's some question about our safety underneath it all. But we don't even realize that, like that's so subconscious to us, right? When our body and our subconscious mind believes that we're safe, then it gives us the green light and that we open up and we can move into new things, right? But if there's
mhm.
any question that we might not be, ooh, we lock up and things become really difficult to walk
Yeah.
through, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that that's so real what you said about realizing that you had a thought process or that you had a sneaky kind of belief back there that didn't even feel true. It was like an old story. It was an old energy, right? That like,
Mhm.
oh, it's probably not going to be as good. You know, I'm
Mhm.
not going to keep having this level of safety and needs met and, comfort and all these things that I've had fulfillment, things that are important to me. Those might not happen. Danger, danger. Like, ugh, I don't know about that, and being able to see it, see that that was triggering the rest of the stuff and say, oh, wait, that's not true. That doesn't
Right.
work for me. Here's
Yeah.
this new thing that does feel true and does work for me. I'm really going to anchor in that. I'm going to remind myself that and that you felt better, like moving through those experiences when really the only thing that changed was your own thoughts about it.
Totally. And I think the way that what has been useful to me this go around too, that I haven't employed so much for myself is like, I did a lot of inner child work the past half a year and realizing that like a lot of those voices or fears were like my little self, right? That is like fucking terrified. And then my grown up self was sort of like, yeah, I'm terrified too, as opposed to like being the grown ass woman.
Yeah.
And like I think for a period of time for the past few months, I've said this to a friend, it's like, I think I forgot who the fuck I was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, when that also clicked in and like you can bring in that fear, that like that kid that's scared, and then I can hold that energy of like mother, woman, badass, whatever. It was so much easier to like make the steps forward.
Mm,
And also bring her with me and be
yeah.
like, all right, you're coming, like
Yeah.
inch by inch, like we're good. But like it
Yeah.
was almost like for a period of time, like there was no adult in the room. And it was just like we're both shivering in the corner.
Oh, there was no adult in the room. God, that's so real. Oh, that is so real. I'm like thinking of all the moments that that same thing's happened to me, and I'm like, wait a minute. I do have the power. I do have the authority and the autonomy in my life. How can I invite that energy in to sort of guide me through this, to guide the wounded, scared parts of myself? Because I have that in me, 100%. Another thing that you said was that one of the hardest parts of this was coming to the decision or letting yourself really make the decision about what needed to happen in the midst
Hmm.
of these changes and transitions. I think it would be really helpful if you shared a little bit about how you knew, like maybe what some of the signs were or what some of your personal indicators are to look out for when there is a change coming, or maybe even in this specific example of things that made you know that you needed to make the decisions that you did so that listeners can maybe
Yeah.
start to
Clock
apply those
it.
to themselves. 100%, they can start to clock when changes are coming.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. And I have to think about like the things like for me a lot of these changes had to do with like a P&L, like looking at like the actual numbers. So I would say first of all, especially if you're a business owner or making financial decisions, you have to look at your numbers. Like you have to I'm not saying focus on if like numbers are declining or not where you want to be like in a negative way, but I think that's part of being your adult self is to
Mhm.
actually like look at things from a logical actual straight on perspective and be real with yourself. And so for me, like a lot of the signs were actually just like looking at numbers, aligning that with my long term vision, taking my pride. Like there's a real part of myself that like had a lot of pride of being like a brick and mortar store owner in New York City. I have like my great grandparents lived in my neighborhood. Like there's a lot of ancestral stuff here. There's a lot of just being born a Jersey girl and like wanting to make it in New York City in me. And like setting that aside and actually looking at like the facts of what is in the greatest health of my vision overall and the company overall and making those kinds of decisions. So I don't know if that's like signs, but it was to me it was like less abstract because it was like a business dollars and cents sort of decision to make. But I will say, and maybe you can help me with this, what was most confusing to me, but I think I'm starting to piece it together was like when I opened the store in New York a couple years ago, like about 2.5 years ago, that felt so aligned. Like how that unfolded, the real estate, the opportunity, da, 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 like it was like, it felt so aligned. The move from Atlanta up here felt so aligned. And I think that was the hardest part for me. It was like, was I wrong then or am I wrong now? And I was always trying to make
Mhm.
myself wrong in a way, but it's like, I don't know. How do you deal with that? We're like, have you ever had that situation? I don't
Yeah.
mean to like turn the tables, but it's like
Yeah.
everything felt aligned to this point, and then it wound up quote unquote failing and
Mm.
like the numbers, dollars and cents sense. I can see now, and I do want to hear what you have to say about this. I can see now how me being in New York and the business in New York did up my profile to a place where now I am getting like opportunities that I know will really enhance my business long term that I wouldn't have had access to if I would have stayed in Atlanta, playing with the in more in the big leagues. And I think that there will be in perpetuity a lot of worthwhile
Yeah.
that would even cover some of the debt that I've lost or whatever. So I'm hoping that's like the long, I have to, if I have the
Mhm.
long view, it like will all piece together. But like, can you answer
Yeah.
that for me? Like, how do you reconcile when you're like, this feels so aligned, I'm so called, da 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 da, and then it's like, fast forward 2.5 years and you're like out of business.
I
Just
the
yeah.
what's
Good.
coming to mind for me is thinking about it in terms of like a relationship. Like if I made a friendship with somebody that felt really aligned and felt really serendipitous and was really wonderful and supportive for, 2 years, and then natural things change, values shift, circumstances change, and it just didn't feel like it was a relationship that continued to bring what I wanted into my life. Do I consider that relationship a failure because it changed and evolved? I personally wouldn't, right? I feel like with business, we can be a little bit more hard on ourselves because
Hmm.
we just can't. There's a lot of reasons why. But I really think that that concept applies to everything. Like sometimes we think that the only definition of success is permanence or like
Yeah,
longevity, but I
totally.
just I just don't necessarily think that's true. I do think that it's interesting when we have those moments of almost like questioning ourselves, like did that mean that like I was somehow wrong? I find myself being really interested by those moments, but like the question that I come back to is like what purpose did it serve?
Yeah,
Right? Like was there something really important about me experiencing that in my path? Can I look back at it objectively in the same way I look at the numbers objectively and see how it was really important for me to hit that point on my journey, and for whatever reason, it just was not meant to be a permanent place. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
I do. And you're reminding me of marriages, right? Like when people get
Yeah.
divorced and they're like, the marriage failed, and I'm divorced, and that marriage was not a failure. We built that business together in that marriage. We wrote a book together in that marriage. We are still close friends. Like he's family. Like there's literally zero regrets, right?
Hmm.
So I like the relationship analogy. Um, I will
Yeah.
say, like, as far as clues, I will just say, like, you could, because you got me thinking again, like, to more like subtle clues as opposed to like the objective clues. I think for me, like, I felt stuck, stagnant. Um, I don't know if I would say depressed, but kind of like down. Like, I wasn't feeling inspired, excited, lit up generally. And I was
Yeah.
very surprised because, like, on paper, I'm living in a place where I thought I would love, business I thought I would love, all of that stuff. And I
Hmm.
have found for myself, like, when I've had depressive episodes, and every single time it was because my container was too small. Like my spirit was crammed into like this little jar, and it really needed to be like take up more space, right? And so I think that like it seems weird that like closing something like makes me take up more space, because you would think like having two businesses is bigger, but like I now can feel with the closure of this store bigger.
Yeah.
Like that my and I'm feeling more alive. I'm feeling more in flow and excited and optimistic. So I would say like track your emotions, and like when you're feeling stuck, depressed, down, not lit up, et cetera, that's probably a clue that like something needs to change. Now, do you need to like sell your business or close your business and move across the country? Maybe not, but I feel like your emotions are like the biggest indicator in your level of energy and enthusiasm. And I'm like typically a very enthusiastic person, and I wasn't.
Hmm.
Everything felt like a slog. And
Hmm.
so I would say that's a clue. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I feel like what can mess us up a little bit is that somehow we've been conditioned to think that like being down or feeling frustrated is just like the way of life or something, that like that's
Mm,
just how everybody feels. And I think it can be a really big shift when we realize that we're actually meant to be in joy, like we're actually meant to be in ease, right? There might be moments, of course, that come up. But again, it's not always rainbows and sunshines. But when you return back to your center after one of those moments, like genuinely you feel inspired, right? Like you feel excited. Like that is actually much more of our normal state, I guess you could say. And so I think sometimes people like miss the signs that they're in a situation that's not aligned to them because they think that that's what's normal. All of
Yeah,
the feelings associated with that, feeling
sure.
frustrated, feeling not motivated, depressed, which to me is a sign I'm not connected with my own self and my joy, like all of those things. And I think those are exactly the signs that there's something that's not lighting you up. There's something that's not aligned. And even for you talking about your business, and again, I think there are so many analogies with relationships or careers or places you're living. Like this can be synonymous with any sort of transition, right? Like sometimes we have to let something go to create space for the thing that wants to come in. If we even think
Yeah.
about like having a certain amount of room in a closet or something, right? Like you got
Yeah.
to
You got to
remove some,
purge.
yeah, you got to remove some items if you want room for the ones that you really want to come in. And I feel like sometimes that like bubbling up and that intensity of feeling like, I'm just like, ugh, that angst almost is
Yeah.
like one of the biggest signs that something's trying to change. The pressure's building so that you can change because the universe wants you to create space to bring in the thing that's waiting for you to come in. And it's probably
Mhm.
the very same thing that you're praying for and asking to come in?
Yeah, exactly. You're actually reminding me of like the first time I've had a bit, like I had a really big change and transition. And it's making me also think about like shifts in identity. So, like,
Mm.
I was a collegiate, well, I was a high school and collegiate athlete, like Division 1, like very high level of track and field. Like on the path when I was in high school, they were like, maybe she could be in the Olympics and like doing all that stuff. And I had a very strong identity in that, like being an athlete, being, all that stuff. And I was miserable, like doing Division 1 athletics for someone like me that's like highly sensitive and like just like distance running specifically is it's 2 a days, you're running 70 miles a week. It's very hard. And also I got very nervous and it was just not for me. So at my junior year, the end of my junior year, I was like, I can't do this one more year. And I was so afraid of two things. I was afraid of like losing that identity. It's like, if I am not this thing that I'm good at, who the fuck am I? How will I be special or known or whatever? And two, which is a lot of worth and issues, is like, what will my dad think? Because I know like my dad like loved to like put in his locker at work like my articles of me in the newspaper and like he would tell everyone, oh my daughter's like so fast at running or whatever. And I went through that process and it was harder to tell my dad than my coach that I was quitting running. And my dad, what I learned was like, he thinks I'm the fucking best no matter what I do. I could be like a bubblegum scraper at the movie theaters, just like cleaning up the seats. And he'd be like, my daughter's the best X, Y, and Z. And I will say there's still reminiscence of that. Like I do have a very strong identity tied to the brand like Modern Mystic. I've been doing this like under Modern Mystic, just tarot readings and stuff like that, like for 12 years. And I think that's another thing. I don't know why I'm bringing this up. It must be relevant somehow, but like that's another shift. It's like not just like letting one thing go to make space for something else, but it's like our identities are a lot oftentimes linked to these ventures, these pursuits, and then you're like, who the fuck am I? And then you get into like an existential crisis,
100%. I think that's what people often call like ego deaths,
Yeah.
is like who you thought you were versus who you really are. And again, I like for me, my journey has been like every time that I've really been forced to see that I don't need to be so attached to, again, relationships, situations, jobs, or whatever. What it's really pointing to me to is that I am so powerful at creating my own reality, at meeting my own needs, at generating the experiences that I want to. But every time that I was overly attached to some other kind of identity, I thought that that's what was giving me what I wanted.
Mm,
And for the kind of life I'm trying to manifest, I feel like my guides are always trying to show me like that's not what's giving you what you need and want. You are giving you what you need and want. And
mhm.
sometimes the only way that we can show you that is for that to be removed and for you to find it in yourself, to like remember who the fuck you
Mm.
are, as you said earlier, right? To be able to like still create and be in that energy that's so important to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The identity shifts and like the ways that we relate to ourselves and define ourselves can get fixed. And I think it's like that part of the change is like that's part of the change. And you're right, like who you are at the core, who you are. Yeah. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
just think I haven't thought about the identity piece in quite some time. I actually designed like I knew I was prone. I know I have some good self-awareness, I guess. I try to look out for my future self. But I knew I was prone to like linking myself up to identity. So when I started Modern Mystic, that's why like it's always been like for the most part, like the brand up front and me a little behind. It's not like
Mm.
Kelley Knight that has modern because I knew that I didn't want my worth to like sink or swim based on whether this venture sunk or swim. But I still haven't been able to escape it fully. I'm still
Yeah.
attached. And I
Yeah.
don't know do you think being attached is bad? Because I almost feel like being attached, like, has me leaned into it, has like get me like fight for it, helps me keep on like defining like what do I want? Do I still want this thing? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that it depends how you define attachment. For me, I would say I think it's so healthy to be connected to things
Yeah,
and to
connected's a better word.
yeah, like
Yeah.
let your heart be in it. Whereas attachment to me feels like it kind of has some subconscious like clinging that we're
Grip on
like,
you too.
yeah, that like
Yeah.
I'm making again parts of like my worth and my safety like contingent on something outside of me. So of course I'm gonna be anxious and all that kind of stuff about it because I
Yeah.
personally lean a little bit to the anxious attachment. Whereas like if I let myself be connected with something, I'm letting it reflect back to me. I'm investing energy into it and I'm letting its energy show and move me. And like I'm letting myself really be in that like sort of reciprocal process energetically
Yeah.
with it. But at any point, a connection can change or it can end. And the same thing that we're talking about, right? So if at any point I choose that another connection feels better or that it needs to shift, I can do that and that's fine, you know?
Mhm.
Whereas with like an attachment, I feel like that would be a lot harder, which I feel like reminds me back to what you said at the beginning of this is that in the past, you would have to get to rock bottom before you really let something go. Whereas this time, it felt like you were able to maneuver it without quite as much drama or something, you
Totally.
know?
Yeah. Hmm.
And I'm wondering, I don't know if what I said makes you think of that or if there's anything else that you could share with the listeners about how to be in that little bit more graceful energy versus that attached energy that kind of forces things to be really sticky and really
Yeah.
dramatic, you know?
I think a good question that I ask myself and that I would offer to the listeners is like, if I were to like lose this thing or let this thing go, what do I make that mean about me? What do I make that mean about me? And I think that was a really good inquiry for me. Like, if I let this store go, like, there was a phase where I was like, I would make this mean that I'm a failure. I would make this mean that, like, my other successes are less valuable. I would make that mean all sorts of things. The same thing when you lose a relationship. If someone leaves you, like, breaks up with you or whatever, it's like, I think the real pain is like what you make that mean about you.
Hmm.
So I forgot your original question, but it sparked that answer. But like that, I think like that inquiry and getting clear on, I think that showed me like the attachment versus the connection to your point. And that inquiry like really revealed some of these places where I need a little more healing and I need a little bit more, a little work or zhuzhing around like
Hmm.
what I make this mean about me.
Yeah. Or, like you said before, what you make that mean about what's possible for you, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
relationship specifically, I'll hear people say, well, if this ends, I might be alone forever because this is the best relationship that I've ever had. If I
That's
couldn't
true.
make this work, I can't make a relationship. Like like they make it mean, which is really also something about them, right? And so I think that question is so wise. Do a whole journaling topic on that, people, please. And then also, can I believe and can I trust that only good things are coming to me, that the
Mm,
universe is supporting me, that if I'm feeling nudged by both my intuition and the universe through these, synchronicities externally, that can only mean that something better is coming for me. Like, do
yeah.
I really believe that those are the only situations in which I'm getting moved is because there's something better and better because we're always expanding, we're always growing. That's just like the nature of us, right? And
Yeah.
of this
Agreed.
universe. Like, can I root into that belief that really only good things happen for me? And can I look out? Can I be on the lookout? Can I clock how things are actually changing for the better, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's like a mantra from Abraham Hicks that I've been working with for decades. It's like everything is always working out for me. And my sister made a little needle point for me because I used to say it all the time, and it's like on my wall. And I think part of that time where I forgot who I was, I think I forgot that too, for a minute. And
Yeah.
you have lapses, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it might be embarrassing to say because I'm supposed to be some like minor public figure in this space, but like that happened to me. Like I forgot. I forgot that good things happen. Like I forgot that I'm not a failure or like all of these things. It's like I forgot for a minute. Sorry guys,
Yeah.
and then but I'm so glad I did because it required me to go back to some of the foundational work. Like must have skipped steps or something, or maybe I'm like trying to get to like a deeper, more fortified level within myself. So I see
Mhm.
the value in the forgetting because I was able to like bring it back on board in like a stronger way that suits me today in 2024.
Mm.
It's like a more mature understanding and more integrated. Like I don't know that I'll forget that one again, you know?
Mm. Gosh, and this reminded me of something I want to share that I feel like is going to help us wrap this up. With a coaching client I was working with this week, one of her things is that she's noticed a resistance to maybe shadow parts of herself or times when, she might make a mistake or other people go through difficult things like the urge to fix, which can
Hmm.
totally relate to, right? And she had an experience that she went through really mindfully, and it didn't go the way that she wanted, but there was still so much good that came out of it. And she had said, I can see the value and how things went this way. Like I can see
Hmm.
the value and it going quote unquote wrong. So
Hmm.
I feel like I don't have to be as resistant to anything but the right way happening. Like I feel like I can be more open to the idea that sometimes like we gotta mess it up a little bit. Sometimes we gotta take a little detour because there's value in that detour that we would have never gotten if we had stayed on the quote unquote right or successful path, even though that is kind of a myth in itself, you know? So even like these, again, these endings, these transitions, even if there's a part of it that does feel kind of painful or ouchy or whatever, like can we look for the value that that experience is offering us overall, especially for the greater vision that we have for ourselves in our lives. And I'd love for you to share any of your kind of like final thoughts on the topic and then also on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have much to add to that because that's like the real juice of life. And that's also, I mean, I've been working a lot this past year on like personal responsibility, right? And so like part of that is like taking responsibility for your part in life and seeing like how everything is always working out for you. And I feel, and this is what I learned through like the past year too, is like that like finding the gift or, everything is always working out. It's more than a mantra. It has to be a stand. Like you have to take a stand. Like this is a belief that is a positive belief that like this is the line in the stand and this is what I'm doubling down on. Otherwise, I think that I didn't take it so strongly in the past and maybe that's why like that line moved. But I would say like find for yourself in these times in life in general like what is your stand and like anchor in that and then all of these transitions if they're viewed through that positive lens will cannot help but to be more graceful or at least you'll be able to my counselor calls it a fucking gift. You'll be able to see if the fucking gift and his definition of a fucking gift is like a diamond wrapped in a turd. It's like the fucking gift. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
everything has that, right? And so it's
Yes.
like it might be looking like a turd, but like get in there. There's like a diamond in there. That's
Yeah.
the fucking gift.
Yeah. If your
Those are my
stance
closing
is,
words.
yes, if your stance is, I will find the diamond and everything, even if I have to look through literal shit to find it,
Yep.
that's my stance, then
Yep.
you're going to find your fucking gift.
Yep. I think it's no better place to end this conversation.
I entirely agree. Okay, I would love for you to share with everybody where they can get connected with you, where they
Yeah.
can find you, where they can support the work that you're doing, or if they're
Yes,
like super
yes.
resonating with you, tell them all the places that they can find you.
So I would love your support to visit modernmysticshop.com if you are not in the Atlanta area and like have a look at our products. They are made by practitioners of magic, everything. Like witches make our shit. It's legit. It's handmade. It's powerful, potent stuff. So check that out. If you'd like to get a reading with me, you can go to kellyknight.me, Kelley with an EY. I'm booked for quite some time, but you can get on the wait list or you can grab a spot. I also have a stable of readers who are highly gifted. So if you go to modernmysticshop.com, you can click, and if you can't get in with me, you can get in with one of them. And also, yeah, follow me on Instagram, Kelley__night. And I will be doing another tarot program this year where I bring in people. It's called Learn Tarot, and we go through a 6-week course. And by the end, you will be at least proficient, is my promise, at reading tarot like me.
Yes, I took her course last year and I absolutely loved it. One of the cards that I got
Thanks.
about like how the program had affected me or how it would be moving forward was the Lover's card. And I know that when you talked about that, that's like a lifelong, partnership, a lifelong connection. And I feel like my lifelong connection with tarot was established based on your program and what you taught. So I can't
Thank
recommend it
you.
highly enough. Definitely follow her on Instagram. She, as of right now, is doing like a card a day, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is so beautiful. One, to learn about the energy of the cards just based on how she interprets them, but two, just to get a little like check in with like
Yeah.
yourself and the energy of everything, which is so fun. And we will
Thanks.
put all of the links to all of those things in the show notes so that everybody can just easily go find it and click to it.
Thank you.
So again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the episode.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yes, and I will catch all of you guys next week for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode and for tuning in to Breakthroughs with Bree. Please share your favorite episodes with your friends and loved ones, and please like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, as it helps me continue to create these episodes to help support your breakthroughs. I would love to stay connected with you, so please follow me on social media at Healing with Bree. Please check out my website at healingwithbree.net, which will always have the most up-to-date information about the services that I'm currently offering. And please consider using the link in the show descriptions to subscribe to my email list so you can be the first to hear about any offerings. You can get all of the free resources that I offer, as well as get my weekly channeled messages. My deepest love and gratitude to you, and I can't wait to have more breakthroughs with you next week.